pavement. Not nice. So thank you so much for coming out. And so it's a tradition here in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland to begin our proceedings with an acknowledgement that this event takes place on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Everything that we do here in the downtown east side and across Vancouver, we know that we're fighting for the rights of Indigenous sovereignty, for people to return to their land, and for, the decolonization of this settler state. So let that, float over us today and influence our hearts and minds as we continue forward. You guys know why we're all here today? Yeah. Yes. Big numbers, 58, right? So we're here to talk about 58 West Hastings. It's been a long fight. It's been a long fight. It's been 10 years of fighting that we've been fighting for social housing at 58 West Hastings. Woo! Yeah. What's there right now? Nothing. There's a big empty lot. Yeah, and people have been fighting the downtown east side to make sure that that site, that empty lot, becomes homes. Homes to people who have been sleeping on the streets, who have been, unfairly tossed out of their homes, evicted, rent-evicted, etc., etc. People have been fighting for lives of dignity. This has been a 10-year fight. And what do we have? We have nothing. We have an empty lot, right? But I believe that this site and the 10-year fight that we've been fighting at 58 is for the soul of the downtown east side. That fight itself, that represents what the downtown east side is about, right? It's the fight against injustice, against colonization, against the rich taking from the poor. And today, not much has changed. We're going to talk about it today, what we need to do next to make sure that there's 100% welfare and pension rate housing. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? How's that? So, 58 West Hastings, right? And that's just one site, but there's something happening in the downtown east side that I'm sure you guys have seen it and you have felt it. The downtown east side is under siege. Does it feel like that? Yeah. Does it feel like there's a bunch of people coming into the neighborhood who look pretty fancy, bring their shops in, holding fancy grocery bags, and they don't like poor people, do they? No, they don't. They would prefer that they don't see the rest of us here, and that they take the neighborhood for themselves. So, sorry. That's the graphic that we made earlier in the year, the big octopus taking the downtown east side. We think of that as the rich and the elites and the government. They're moving into our neighborhood. They're trying to get us out of here. And we're not going to let that happen, are we? No, we're not. So, let's start. I'm going to do a really quick history of 58 West Hastings, all right? Because I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it, but just for everyone that's new here, we'll just go through it real quick. So let's start with, who was here in 2010, the Olympics? There you go. I wasn't here yet, so you guys are the veterans of a really big fight there. There's a tent city there, right? Yeah. Yeah, badass. You guys did really sick stuff there.
Yeah, I worked security on the main gate for 2 weeks at the that site there. Day D word and day BB.
Yeah. Okay.
There, all 2 weeks.
Thanks. Yeah, big ups to that guy. All right. So then again in 2016, there was another tent city there, and this time we got Mayor Gregor Robertson. He was feeling the squeeze because he didn't want the tent city to be there. We made him come down to Carnegie right here, and we made him sign a contract. You guys remember that? Yeah? Yeah. Remember this? This is the contract. He signed with community pressure. We were standing all around him, yelling at him, making him sign the contract, sign the contract. Sign the contract for 100% welfare and pension rate community-controlled housing at 58 West Hastings. You guys remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Larry says the treaties haven't changed.
The treaties haven't changed. Typical government white man signs a contract, rips it up the next day. So let's review what happened there. August 2016, he promised us 100% welfare and pension rate housing and community control. Guess what happened? Nothing happened. And he came back to us 2 years later in February with 30% welfare and pension rate housing. 30%. So there's 230 units promised there. That would be 77 units of welfare and pension rate housing. Is that enough to house the people of downtown East Side? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. We weren't very happy with that, so we took it to them. They also had to put landlords in. Forgot about that. May 1st, 2018, we took City Hall. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. So a bunch of us, with the Our Homes Can't Wait coalition, the groups came out, and we took City Hall. We got there before they did, and they get there pretty early, so we got there even earlier than them. And we made sure that they couldn't get inside to sign their papers, to make sure that, whatever they're doing, the status quo goes on. We stopped them. We made a blockade, and we didn't let them in for half the day. And it was pretty sick. And, yeah, no business as usual. And I'd also like to give a big ups to the seniors of Chinatown Concern Group, who are here today. Can you guys give them a big hand? Because when we did that blockade, we faced off with the police. They lined up. They had their big, big guys with the guns in their waistbands or whatever. And the seniors, they stood in front of us. They protected us. And the cops left. They were scared because we were unified together. So another big hand for the Chinese seniors. Thank you so much for coming out today. So, after this, again, government, they fled. They actually ran away and hid inside a Whole Foods because they were scared of us. But, they hid and they knew that an election was coming. So we had an election this year too. We had an election and a bunch of them fled. So let's look at the election. Remember these guys? These bozos? Yeah, okay, so here are their names. Doesn't really matter what their names are, but
A couple of them are back.
yeah, a bunch of them are gone. Bye guys, bye. Unfortunately, we still have Councillor Jejanova with the MPA and Carr with Green. They're still around, unfortunately, but that's another story. We'll talk about it soon. Do you remember what happened this election? Do you remember one person that got elected? Someone very important. Big up to the people's champ, Jean Swanson. Jean Swanson. Jean, if you don't know her, that's weird, but she has been fighting for the downtown East Side for decades now. And she was elected as one of the city councilors, alright? And that's a huge win for us, but it's just the beginning. Because she's only as strong as we are as a movement, as a neighborhood, and she's just like the in. She's the wedge in the door, so we can get in there, right? So we gotta keep organizing. Just because Jean's in there, not much is gonna change. We have to keep fighting and make sure that she is still accountable to us. We know she will be, but let's just keep doing it, right? All right, so this is really important. This is the next step of 58 West Hastings. So, the first council meeting of the new council, they met on November 13th. Jean Swanson brought a very important motion to their first meeting. That's motion B4 for 58 West Hastings. Let's read over it. So, she wanted the city to reaffirm its commitment to 100% welfare and pension rate housing in 58. How's that sound? Not bad. Not bad, right? Next. She wanted the city staff to look into at least 3 additional sources of funding to ensure that 100% is kept, and that includes city funding. That's really important. We're going to talk about that soon. That's super key, because that means that the city has to dip into its big old pockets to make sure that they keep its promise, right? So that was sick. Next, and the city staff will meet with the Our Homes Can't Wait coalition to plan how to implement community-controlled housing. We're going to talk a little bit about community-controlled housing and why it's important for downtown East Side. But these were the 3 main points that were put forward to that motion. And a bunch of us came out. Again, they weren't really happy to see us. The old, have you guys been to City Hall? There's this like big ugly guy there. He's like the head of security. He looks kind of like a dog. He didn't let us in. He lectured us. He was like, all right, I'll let you in this time, but you have to behave. And then Ayanis cussed him out, and it was really cool. So big ups to Ayanis for cussing out that ugly dude. But we were let in. We went there 3 days in a row. at 9:30 in the morning to make sure that this would pass. They kept delaying it. They kept being like, oh, let's meet another day. Let's meet another day. We're working people. We have families. We have stuff to do. And they sit there and make 80K and like make us wait. Is that right? No. No. And you know what they did with G's motion? They crumpled it up. They weren't really happy with it. And they struck out 2 important parts of the motion. Shame. Shame. Yeah. Shame. They rewrote it. So they have a new one. The referral motion. Got the same thing. They got to reaffirm the 100% welfare and pension rate housing. They kept that. That's okay. But they rewrote something. They want city staff to look into funding for 100% at 58. And if the city can't find funding for 100%, they will build 50% welfare and pension rate housing at 58 and make up the 50% somewhere else. What does that? How does that sound? How does that sound? Because when we see this in downtown Eastside, we know what we actually call it, and it's bullshit. And it's a bunch of bullshit, and that's what they passed. They approved this motion. They crumpled up the old one that Gene had, and they made this new one that's a bunch of bullshit. Look, it's not looking good for us, but we have to keep fighting. We've got to make sure that at least they keep to that first bit. Reaffirm 100%, and we got to make that city staff work its ass off to find other sources of funding. And we're going to talk about some of those options later today. So we want to talk about one thing. So before I let the other speakers talk, I've been taking up a lot of time. We're going to talk about social housing versus social mix. You guys know what social mix is? Yeah? Well, okay, we'll do a little primer. So, social mix is when they build something they call social housing, but really, it's a little broken up. What happens is, just a third of it, just a little tiny part of it, probably at the bottom, we get our own door too. That's going to be welfare and pension rate, right?
Is that a terror building?
Hey, Larry, settle down. So, 1/3 of it goes to the people of downtown Eastside. And where does the rest of it go? It goes to Hills rate rentals and goes to condos. What kind of people live in that? Fancy guys, rich people, jerks. And let's break it down a little bit more. All right, so Hills rate rentals. Does someone know what this jargon means? Ayannis, you want to tell us?
Limits.
Yeah, housing income limits. They say that this is the key to making sure there's affordable housing. It's 1/3 of your income goes to rent. But it really, what they don't talk about is that there's a bottom limit for that. In order to get into that housing, you have to be making $45,000 a year. 48,000 a year. Who here makes 48,000 a year? Put up your hand. Get out of here. Get out of here. None of us do. So none of us do. And this is what they call social housing these days. Vision Vancouver made this. This is what Vision Vancouver made social housing. And shame, right? Because this is not going to house anybody. This is not going to help us. In fact, there's something even more insidious, something worse about this. What it does is that it makes sure that we can't live together in one building, like 58, 100%. It makes sure that there's a few buildings every couple of neighborhoods. There's going to be a tiny building where someone can live over there in Marpole, someone maybe on Hastings, and someone over there in like the west side or something. That's breaking up the community. In between all of that, there's just going to be a bunch of condos. There's going to be a bunch of condos, and it's going to make sure that we, as the people of the downtown east side of Chinatown, that we can't live together. They don't want us to live together. Because they're scared. They're scared that if we live together, we can organize and build the kind of community power to take back the kind of homes that we need.
They have reason to be scared.
They do. Yeah. So, what we're talking about, this is social mix. This is the future that the city wants. Is maybe they'll give us some housing. They'll give us some modulars over there. They'll give us some modulars over there. They'll give us the basement suites of a condo over there. And make sure that the downtown east side gets transformed into the sea of condos. We don't want that, do we?
No, we don't.
And what happens when we get split up? people get homeless, right? That's what happens. When the community is split up, when we can't access the amenities we need, when we can't see our friends, our families, our neighborhood, our society, our healthcare providers, what happens? People get isolated. And that's not good. That's not good. So when we talk about the soul of the downtown east side, that's exactly what we're fighting for. We're talking 100% housing at 58 and beyond. We have to stay together. We have to stay strong together. Otherwise, they're going to split us up, and we're never going to see each other again. Right?
So how are you going to do that?
Well, we need 100% welfare and pension rate housing, right? Thanks for the question. Because that means if we have more of these buildings at 100%, we can stay together as a big family, as the downtown east side has been for decades now. For decades. We need real social housing. Real social housing. And it's only going to happen if we fight for it. Is that right? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to fight for real social housing? All right. Okay. So that's a little, the social housing, social mix thing. That's going to be really key to our fight. Because that's what the city wants, all these nonprofits, Janice Abbott of Atira. We got some folks all over the nonprofit elite. They think that if poor people live together, that's ghettoization. That's what they're using, that's the word they're using. Right? But when we think of poor people living together, we think about building community, building family, building love, building power. Is that right? Yes, boy. What's up? Alright, so we're going to talk about how we get there, right? Oh wait, no, we're going to talk about the jerks that are in our way first. Alright, so here's number one. Here's jerk number one. This is Carol Lee. She's one of the funders for the project as it is right now. Carol Lee, she is part of the Chinatown Foundation. She's a daughter of a billionaire real estate mogul. And she says that she's promising 30 million. But actually, we just fact-checked that. It's 20 million. Yeah, she lied. She lied. Already, I know. So 20 million. Then we have, over here, Selena Robinson.
That's so?
NDP Minister of Housing. She also promised us 30 million. But she has told us as well that she does not want 100%. She won't give us a reason, but I think we know why. Right? And then last but not least, we have this fella. Recognize him?
He's the mayor.
Canister! He's our new mayor. Get used to this mug, alright?
He wasn't even there when we were there.
I know. He promised us 100% welfare and pension rate housing at 58 just in this room, not too long ago. Let's see what happens with that promise. Do we have Gregor too, perhaps? We don't know. We'll see what happens. So these three people, they're the ones that are going to decide whether or not we get the housing that we need. And we have to make sure that these people know that we need 100% welfare and pension rate housing at 58 West Hastings. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Alright. So we're going to come back together as Our Homes Can't Wait Coalition. We came together to make sure that there's not just 100% welfare and pension rate housing at 58, but at 9 more sites across the downtown east side. That's 10 sites of housing with at least 150 units in each of them for people on welfare and pensions. Does that sound good? Yeah? Not bad? Alright, let's go through our demands again. You want social housing? So, how do we get there? 100% welfare and pension rate housing at 58 West Hastings. That's step one. As promised. By that guy. And next, we have housing on 10 city-owned sites. Not bad. By the Regent, maybe? And then by 105 Kiefer. Does that sound good? Yes. Yeah. Big ups again to the Chinatown seniors for their fight for 105 Kiefer. Then, save, repair, and improve the SROs. Not bad? Not bad? Dignified housing, what does that mean? 500 square feet rooms, no more micro suites, no more closets for us to stand up and sleep in. Kitchen and bathroom, so we can make some food, use the toilet. Not bad, right? In privacy, we want that. And we want a rent freeze. We want real rent control. You know, real social housing. And those are our demands. Right? So, we have a few speakers today. We're going to be talking about the next step of the fight. We got some wacky ideas, and hopefully we want to bounce them off you guys to make sure that they sound good. And that's going to lead us into the next stage of the battle. Because we're going to keep fighting, aren't we? Right? Just the downtown east side has always done. And this is yet more than 58. This is the soul of the downtown east side that we're talking about. The fighting spirit that has made sure that this is the most resilient neighborhood in all of Canada. Fuck yes. Okay, alright. Alright, so we're going to start just quickly with Ianis from Vandu. He's going to talk about community-controlled housing and why we need it. So thanks, guys.
I don't think I can talk as fast as Vince, so we'll definitely be slower. Yeah, so one of the things that's really been in this fight is the question of what we mean by community-controlled housing. Because we've been putting that forward because we know that people don't want to be moved into so-called supportive housing, these housing developments that are run by NGOs, where you're constantly surveilled, where people have a lot of, the staff have a lot of power over you. The staff aren't necessarily the problem, but sometimes they are. There's corruption. We know there's corruption in those buildings, people taking guest fees and all these practices that we've had historically in the downtown east side. But then also in the supportive housing model, you have no tenant rights. So basically they're completely at the discretion of a big NGO, which is getting a lot of money from the government and doesn't necessarily have any stake or any reason to deal with people who might be difficult at times. And I think we can all be difficult at times. I think one of the things we have to recognize about housing is it's kind of where all of the shit, all of the exploitation and the oppression and the stigma and the indignities that we face in society, when we're at home, that's where all that shit often hits us, right? So, you know, and people do get stressed out and they do get into conflicts with their neighbors. But what the supportive housing model doesn't actually try to resolve those problems. The resolution is purely through social control. And I think what we can say about the social mix model is it's another kind of social control. I think if we looked closely at the developments that they're talking about where they put a few poor people in with a lot of more middle class affluent people, some poor people can exist in that milieu and do fine. But a lot of people won't, and they'll be driven out, they'll be kicked out, their neighbors will complain about them, and eventually they'll leave, and eventually you'll only have the poor people who can behave themselves in those buildings, right? Which is not all of us. So we've been asked a whole bunch of times, well, can 100% poor people housing really work? Isn't it just gonna be a zoo? And we have all these stereotypes of, in our society, of the ghetto and of housing projects as being really dangerous, awful places. And a lot of that is bullshit. Some of that is true, like I said, like if your neighborhood is where all of the most poor and oppressed people with all of the shit of this society coming down on them live, that's gonna generate conflict and problems, and a lot of it is the state criminalizing us and trying to control us. But I think we can also counterpose a vision that's actually a model of housing that actually would be liberatory for people, but I don't think it's been done yet. Like, I don't think that we have a template that we can easily go to. And the politicians always want to say, well, what's your example? So we've got like good examples like the McLean Park social housing that we have in the neighborhood. Lots of people live in there. Jack lives there. He likes it. There's a real diversity of people in there. Laurel lives there too. There's a real diversity of people in there that can get along and live fine. But I don't think it's the ideal model. I think what we want is housing where people are consciously developing communities that support each other, and also communities of resistance to actually change the fucked up system that's affecting us. So I've been putting forward, and I was asked to share it with the group, this idea of a model of truly democratic housing where we would have a building like the one at 58 where there would be an elected governance for the building, so a democratic structure for people to elect who would be the board or the directors like you have in a housing co-op, but then also a model of actual community organizing and building community. So they spend a lot of money on the management of these buildings. Like when they hire a TIRA or PHS or one of these other housing service providers, they don't do that shit for free. They get a contract and they pay people to be staff people in the buildings. They take a cut of overhead for their big top-heavy management. What if we take that money instead and stipend or pay community organizers on each floor who would go door to door regularly and check in with their neighbors, who would create floor councils where people could come together and resolve their problems. We know that our communities, when we're organized and when we have the time and the space to actually sit down and talk to each other, can sort through a lot of these problems, because they're not antagonistic problems. We're not actually oppressing each other in most instances. We might just take out our frustration at our oppression on our neighbors, which is a problem, right? That's a shitty thing that happens. But if we can create the space and the mechanisms for actually bringing people together and collectively resolving those problems, we can actually have a much better model. So that's what we presented. Nobody has yet said to us, that sounds like a really good idea. How could we do that? So I think the default is still to go, like I think honestly what we're looking at 58 likely is another imposed model of supportive housing. But we have to keep alive this idea that we want something better, something that's actually emancipatory or liberatory, real community controlled housing.
Right on.
Thank you, Ayanis. Does anyone have any questions for Ayanis about organized buildings and community organizers on every floor? Any questions? You guys like it? Sound good? Yeah, because it beats being under Tira's thumb, doesn't it? Right? All right. So next up we have Laurel. Laurel's going to talk a bit about how housing is a public health crisis and how. Oh, you have a question? Sorry.
Just a comment. Vince and I and Fiona met with city staff yesterday, and a lot of the rationale they were giving for the 50%, only 50% welfare and pension rate, was that they need the other money to cover operating costs. Now, when Ayanis talks about a co-op model, that is something that could counter their argument about operating costs. Or we can decrease the operating costs of the building if everyone, like in a co-op, pitches in, does the routine stuff. They're not going to fix the elevator, but they can slap some paint on when somebody moves out, stuff like that. Is that something that people would be interested in?
Does anyone else have any questions for Ayanis and Laurel about that? No? Okay, so we're moving on. We're going to be talking about how housing and homelessness is a public health crisis and how healing is housing and housing is healing, all right? Yeah. Give it up for Laurel.
Yeah, I'm really not going to say too much about that. I mean, it's pretty obvious that it's pretty hard to be truly healthy when you're living outside on the street. So I just want to turn it over to you folks. What are your thoughts about housing and healing? And also the other aspect is that the building is, well, it's going to go ahead. 2 floors of the building are going to be Vancouver Coastal Health. Now, that's not everybody's flavor, and Larry's going to talk about Native health and Native issues in the building as well, but just wonder what people's thoughts are about housing and healing. And
just off the topic, like, no, I can speak. Just immediately give everybody an old car that you're scrapping. At least you can keep your bedding dry and your clothes clean and your stuff locked up. I mean, just immediately. I mean, it's cold outside. I lived in a vehicle a lot of times. I liked it.
But you want a house one day, don't you?
Trust me, you don't want a house.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want a basement. I'm gonna just put all my shit there. All right, but we do want homes. So maybe we need some stopgap solutions. Like, there's a bunch of junky cars all over the place. That's one way. Store your stuff. Any other thoughts on housing and healing and health? Would you like the mic?
Hello everyone, my name is Susan. I live in the downtown east side. I've been here a really long time paying attention to Crown Colony crime. I want to take my hat off to one of the councillors elect from Six Nations who said, I don't want to swear to the Queen, I want to swear my oath to the people in the community. And I was so pleased to hear that somebody finally stood up and said that. Now I'd like to say, our councillors all swear their oath to the ground. Our community's been gentrified to the nth degree. I'd like to suggest, and I have to City Council as well as to David Eby, who made his bonds down here before he catapulted, that we could actually put into receivership every condo tower that was ever used to launder money, and we could actually create a gated red light community social enterprise somewhere looking after everybody the best way humanly possible. I'd like to also say to you, what is the commons? Where is the people's space? Why is everything taken away from us? Why is everything turned into a dog toilet these days? We don't have any green space. We don't have any parks. We don't have any peace. We don't have any quiet. All we got is greedy developers and embedded politicians fucking shit up. Pardon my language, but I believe we're allowed to say fuck shit down here. Because that's all we get. Layer upon layer upon layer, and we're buried alive in fuck shit. I want to be able to go out and sit down in a park. I can't do that. I want to be able to find a park. I can't do that. I can't even park anywhere, and I've still got wheels, and I take my hands off to everyone who's living homeless out on the streets or in your bug-infested places like the one I live in that's never been free of bugs, that continues to throw furniture out the door and people out the door as soon as they say, hey, couldn't we do something different here? Because the management don't care. Some of them are called success. I call them excess regulations. You know, there's a lot of management teams making buku bucks off of bullshit like bug shit. And I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired of CCAP ruining the community too, because I call them gatekeepers. I truly do. Not that I didn't take my hat off to Jean and say, too late and too tame, baby. You didn't do enough. Glad you got the order. Glad you're sitting at council. But hey, come back downtown, baby. Come back and eat some bug shit, fuck shit, please, once in a while. Because it's truly what's gone on. We've got gatekeepers. They get paid both ways, every which way, and we don't know until they catapult to where they intend to go. Larry Campbell, what did he do? He covered up everything. Did you know about the snuff corn mill at 425 Carroll Street? Who buried that? The police, the integrated security squads, and everybody sitting there marching for 30 years for missing and murdered what? You know, it's all got to stop. It's Crown Colony crime on your dime. Taxpayers, how deep are your pockets? How leaky are your condos? Guess what, the new towers, they're walking off the job site saying it's dangerous to work here. I pity the people that are going to live here. Stack and pack and crash.
Thank you. Oh, that's good. Okay. And what do we think of the landlords and the developers and the politicians? Yeah, boo, fuck them, fuck them. All right, there you go.
Ayannis mentioned that maybe what they have in mind is another supportive housing building. Atira or somebody else. And you know, he talked about that a little bit. We all know it's crap, but we really need to hear from you folks. What is your experience with supportive housing? The more we can put together, the more we can present to city staff and say, the people don't want this, and this is why, this is why, this is why. The other thing is with Vancouver Coastal Health being there, they can provide plenty of supports. There's no need for Atira or Lookout.
Anyone got any supportive housing horror stories for us? Okay. All right, we can move on. Lama? Oh, Lama. He's back.
Thank you. One of the things that characterizes supportive housing is the constant presence of the police. And we don't want that. What we would like to see happen is that the community can take back the space and organize, but also incorporate restorative justice to deal with conflicts that would arise with people who live there. And we want to be able to fix these problems by ourselves without having to call VPD. And we also wanted that the ground floor space to be available for community meetings, organizing, but also really think about how do we heal using traditional methods. And I think that we need to keep that in mind so that when we talk about community control, we're thinking about our people, we're thinking about the resources we have within this community to deal with problems that we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Lama. Right on. Okay, so next we're going to invite Robin. We want to talk a bit about, so we have a wild idea that we want this building, 58, to be the first step in real reconciliation in the downtown east side. And what does that mean? We welcome in our Indigenous mothers and let them reunify their families. So, Robin's going to talk a bit about that. Big up to Robin.
Hi, my name is Robin. I grew up here in the downtown east side. Currently from a band, not from around here, but there's so many of us Indigenous people within the community that is being displaced. So when we're away from our band, we're not getting no funding. We're out here, we're urban Indians living in the city, and you know, we're all displaced. We have nowhere to go. We have nowhere for support. Our families, me as a mother dealing with the situation, my kids were apprehended. And for reasons because we don't have proper housing. Children are being separated from their families because there is no proper housing. Rent is so high, people are going homeless. The workers are just waiting like sharks, like vultures, to snatch up our kids and get funding for it. So, you know, with this 58 West Hastings, I think, you know, we need to also implement and have it open for families because, you know, we need more buildings with families. And not only that, but like, you know, when we're working with families, we need to start supporting each other. We need a community. We need to not be separated. We need to be together 100% and out with the rich and let's put us all together. So, yeah, does anybody have any questions?
I've heard that some people get in a cash stuff, especially women who've had their kids out there, they get in a catch-22 where you can't get housing because you don't have your kids, and you can't get your kids. Can you talk a little bit?
Exactly. So a little bit about that. Like for example, if you're homeless, then if you have kids and your kids for whatever reasons get apprehended because of Section 13, the new section that they've been doing this with our kids, we lose our housing, we lose our funding. Therefore, we have to give up our housing. We go into SROs. Now, how do the parents find housing when our rent is low and you know it's families and communities are being displaced and not only Indigenous but all people are being displaced. So yeah, you know, we really need to like stand together, stand as a community. We need to unite, and we need to really keep our families together. So thank you.
You love it. And then last but not least, the Grandmaster himself, Larry. He's going to come out and we're going to talk about what does real reconciliation look like, right?
Everybody can hear me, I think? I represent a group called the American Indian Movement. We're based out of Minnesota. We were formed in the 60s because of our urban brothers and sisters being abused in the cities. We decided to come to East Hastings. I'm not from here, my wife's from Saskatchewan. But because of the pipeline and because of the homelessness in East Hastings, that not any government officials, not any government party really cares about these issues. I think that clear. We elected the NDP, and where's the NDP? They left this area, Malini Marks, to the sharks out here. Where's the money? They have $1 billion surplus of last week. Why isn't anybody being taken off the street? They have a policy they're going to come out with. The Native Friendship Center has adopted it already. We came out against our own Friendship Center. If you don't go into a shelter, then those people won't look for housing for you, right? Shame on them. My people don't seek shelters because of residential schools or whatever, so they sleep out in the street. So Melanie Marks knows that. So she's going to leave our people out on the street.
Shame.
Shame. Our people are dying out on the street and nobody really cares. Sure, we have this facility within the Carnegie, but at the end of the day, Carnegie's never been always here for us. Let's make that straight. They give us this room, but they've never always been here. They have a park. They don't fight for us there. The police come in, the rangers come in and clear the tents out of there. They have nowhere to go, these people. On a rainy day, is anybody going to use that park? I look forward to the day that there's a different community here, that there's kids here and there's everybody playing on the street. And that's what the government said they wanted. But that's not what the government's striving for. They want to change this community, but without taking these people off the street. And for Akira does a lot of good things out on the street. There are little pockets there. Make no mistake. I mean, they do good things out there. But their housing is offside. Their housing doesn't care about East Hastings, it seems like. We met with the executives. They said, hey, you get free government money. Their housing, at least 3/4 of those people in these two buildings, that's not on low income. And I would probably, best to say, it's probably more like 80 or 85% they get. Because there's people living next door to a guy that's not doing $375, but the grandmother pays for the rent $600-700 for that person next door. I joined this coalition here, our group did, because I like their response. I like what this man did in Chinatown. I mean, with his people, saying that, hey, we don't need these big rich condos. We need homes that's affordable for our old people and for our people. Not higher income that nobody can afford. That's a joke. And about 100% housing? Look, we're not. All we're trying to do is heal as a community, and it's easy to heal as a community together. We understand each other. As soon as we're going to 50% or 40%, those people aren't going to understand us, and we're going to be out on the street again. That's what the community builders are famous at. That's what Parkman is famous at. They just want the money. And if anybody thinks that they're in it to help people, come on, look at those buildings. And some of those own employees live in those buildings. I've seen one that works at the front there, that's from the housing project of Akira. He lives in that building there. How? You know? So I think we have to stand together. We have a counselor. I think we can cause some disruption for that council. If 100% housing isn't granted to us, and we're one group that will block any housing here physically, if they want to build any more Akira buildings that doesn't help our people, right? Woo!
Yeah! Hell yeah.
We Indian movement theme, right? Letting them know, we're not pleased with your housing, but you keep sloughing us off to that housing. Why isn't the president here addressing that? What, because she's in bed with the CCO of BC Housing? And I don't say that as a joke. I'm dead serious, right? You know? Married or whatever, that's billions of dollars going to that corporation. I bet you they can't justify every single dollar, right? You know what I mean? So I'm here to say that the American Indian movement's going to make some changes here. A lot of people don't like this now. Even some of the people out in the street that's trying to make money. I'm not here to judge those people out there making money, their drugs or whatever. Only problem I got is that fentanyl, right? And that fentanyl is destroying this community because the government says that they don't have enough manpower to deal with that coming over in the ships and our money, or their money being bought up by real estate. You know, and that's not putting it onto my friend's community. It's just reality. Everybody's in a drug trade. They just happen to be the same people bringing over fentanyl are the same people buying up condos and everything. And it affects us on the street here. Not only the drugs, but them buying up everything because there's no money for us. What about these buildings here that's rotten down the street from Von Du's and area across the street? Why don't they knock down those buildings and start building some buildings for us? It's not like they don't own them, they must own them. They're a disgrace, you know, the yellow building right down the street here. That's a massive building. So, you know, I'm here today to plead with this community. We can't do it on our own. American Indian movement can't do it without the community, right? I have maybe about 7 warriors here, right? You know what I mean? But I have a lot of following, a lot of support, right? You know what I mean? But we need to work together. You know, there shouldn't be one homeless person out in the street. You know, I represent First Nations, but there's no race, there's no color between homelessness or people that's low income. Yeah, but I think that we have such a gift to this community. You're on unceded territory, right? You're trying to build 58 into something we don't want. That's unceded territory, right? We have to start making our stands as Aboriginal people and drawing people in because it's about healing. And let's draw in the people that's willing to heal in that building. Where's Aboriginal close to health? Nowhere to be found downtown East Hastings. Why not? Half this community is Aboriginal. But they're not down here. They're not down here for mental illness or nothing. You know? Where's our Native organizations? Friendship Center, giving up policies that hurt our people. Aboriginal policing. You know where they are?
Just a dollar sign there.
Way up at Commercial. And you know what that director says about the people down here? I wouldn't lose any sleep if anybody's rights get violated down here. Seriously? You're in that position to defend the people's rights down here. But we know what Vancouver PD does down here. And that's unacceptable too. If this community is going to go ahead, Vancouver PD has to be on side. Because this community will never heal, and Vancouver PD are being bullies out there. And shame on the superintendent that runs it down here. She's an Aboriginal woman. And I can tell you this today, we won't work with anybody within Vancouver PD unless she moves somewhere else in a job. She allowed this abuse to happen under her watch. You know? The chief comes here to have lunch. You know, they pretend the community supports Vancouver PD and the chief. And guess who pays for the meal here for the chief? Vancouver PD union. You know? And I'll say this one more thing. You know, we have to make everybody accountable. From Miss Marks to the director of this center, to the supervisor off of Highland Park, to the mayor. They all have to be held accountable. You know, this director made me run around from anybody in the community. They're just hungry. They're just going there to get something to eat, but they manipulate that into making it look like we support you down here, right? Well, what is supported down here? All these stores that come in here and gouge this community 3 times as much that food is worth in their stores than they sell my people rubbing alcohol. You know why? Because the police don't want 50% on there to clean the bongs. The police want 99% alcohol to clean their bongs. Well, my answer to these stores, I went to every single store out there. Stop your selling of your rubbing alcohol. If anybody wants to clean the bong like me, I'm a weed smoker. I'll go 2 blocks out of this district and buy myself some rubbing alcohol and use it. But these stores know better than that. They're selling it to my people and they're drinking it straight. You know, shame on these stores for doing that, right? So we have to make everybody in this community accountable. We are the community in here. We want to heal and we want to move ahead. We have things in that building that we're requesting through our group here. We want about 40 or 50% Aboriginal housing in that 100%. Why? Because we have massive people on the street. We have women on the street. We have to get our women out of this situation. Our women are in danger every day on that street. You know, women are going home with men because they need a place to stay. You know, and this government knows that. Our women are suffering out there, and we are warriors to protect our women. So we have to make changes here, or we're prepared to go to jail over it, right? You know what I mean? You know,
yeah.
This community is dying slowly, you know? And those that have the power to give a shit, they don't. So it's up to us as a community to do it. And the American Indian movement will be behind you. Oh.
Hell yeah! Hell yeah, Larry. Lisa, what's up? Yeah, actually, yeah, let's talk. Okay, actually, you want to come up? So thanks, Larry. So Larry put out a proposal there, is that if half the folks in the downtown east side are Aboriginal, maybe 50% of 58 West Hastings should be Aboriginal. Does that sound good? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. All right. So now we have Teresa from the Downtown Eastside Power of Women. She's been in this fight for a long ass time. She's a real veteran. And let's give the floor to Teresa.
Oh.
Hi. So my name is Teresa Dolores Gray. A lot of people know I'm Simsian from Prince Rupert. I was born here in Vancouver. I've lived here most of my life. I've been volunteering at the Downtown Eastside Women's Center since the year about 2000. You know, I was poor and I came back down to this area and I got involved and volunteered, you know. But we've been doing a lot since 2000. We've been almost volunteering at every tent city since 2000, really. Woodwards was the first start. That's where I was homeless and now I live there. But it was a huge campaign for the homeless, going up against the Vancouver Police Department that was really racist, the Vancouver City Council at that time, who were really racist. There was, before Sam Sullivan, it was Larry Campbell, who was an ex-RCMP who hates natives. And now he's a senator who never helped us. He just sent the cops against us. And, you know, to put us in jail and threw all our tents and everything into the garbage. So 58 West Hastings is important to us since the 2010 Olympics. The Downtown Eastside Women's Center, along with Van Du and the Carnegie Community Action Program and Alliance Against Displacement, had a tent city there to oppose the Olympics. So that's, you know, it's now 2018 and it's something that we had 3 tent cities there. One in 2010 for almost 6 months, and then one in 2015 for like 4 months, and then off and on for this past year, people have been staying on the outside because if they went inside the garden, they would be arrested. So a lot of people stay on the street there between Potluck Cafe and the bar there. So I myself volunteered there in 2010. I just got a home the first time in 7 years, so I volunteered at that tent city with the Women's Center. So I lived at Woodwards right across the street, so I could go over at night, you know, and help out. And at that time, I'd say we helped thousands of people, maybe over 4,000 people over the length of that one tent city. And it was awesome. The people gave us tents they bought us food to give away to the people, clothing, the Women's Center. You know, we brought a lot of our own the clothing from the Women's Center to the tent cities. And then we also brought food. And then we asked for donations from the Women's Center for the tent city. And you know, we really made the effort, but unfortunately, that was the last tent city that the Women's Center could be actively involved with because the epidemic of ODs at that time was too much for us, and there are a lot of young people ODing, and because it was such a small space, there wasn't enough people to keep it going. So I really want to advocate that people do something like help us to build tiny homes and modular housing, so that will have a more helpful way to get people off of living in streets and at these temporary shelters that really don't do it. So I really want to thank the people that have spoken before me. I know that a lot of times people don't know the full history, and yes, a lot of times people are, you know, we're poor and we get involved with different groups that, you know, don't always follow through, like the good people at CCAP get screwed around by the city of Vancouver, and they don't give us social housing like Gregor Robertson promised at 58 West Hastings. So we're going to just keep on going and do what we can. I'd really like to thank the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh people whose land I'm standing on, because it's their land, and I'd like to be in solidarity with them and say I agree that 58 West Hastings should be at least 50% native, and not just that, you know, it should be really for the homeless that made that social housing similar to Woodwards where I live. Unfortunately, you know, less than half the people at Woodwards were squatters that built that place. And I think that as political activists, we are all here doing this. You know, I feel that we need like a medal for the work we've done. We know who we are, but I feel sometimes it'd be nice if we had a party and our names are named, you know, from the Carnegie, from the Women's Center. You know, I'd like to thank the people that helped me along the way. I can't name them all, but you know, that's the reason why I give back, and I'm thankful. Thanks, everybody.
All right, and thank you all so much for sitting through that, for being patient with us through this presentation. And now we have something very exciting, is that we are going to launch the next step of this fight to make sure there's 100% community-controlled welfare and pension rate housing at 58 West Hastings. You guys excited? Yeah. So, it's going back to council in January, right? And we're going to make sure that when they come to vote for that, we're going to be there to make sure that they're going to give us what we've been fighting for 10 years. Right? Yeah! All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Fiona. Let's welcome Fiona. She is the new CCAP coordinator. She's been great, and here she is.
So one of the things that keeps coming up in the conversation is about money. So we know there's other issues going on. There's things about the social mix, the hills rate, buildings being self-sufficient. But the thing on paper that the city keeps talking about is where is the money going to come from? That was what was in the motion. So the city was referred to try to find out where is the money going to come from to cover the gap for buildings, the capital expenses of the building, and then the operating expenses. So between us, we kind of put our heads together, came up with a few ideas. We met with the city yesterday, talked about some ideas. We're not experts, we're not city staff, we're not paid, we don't have all the resources. So we kind of just like thought up some ideas, and my math may not be perfect, but these are just some thoughts that we had about how they could cover this shortfall they're talking about, and that's preventing building 100% shelter rate housing. So one thing we looked at is the budget. This is like the people's PowerPoint. We don't have a big fancy one like this did. So for 2019, the budget's going to come up next week. And couple things that you can see on this chart. So what's one of the big items you see here on the budget?
Oh, this budget's probably the biggest there.
What do you think of the VPD here?
Whoa. So the police budget is 21%. Community services, they've marked at 23%, but it's not all community services the way we think of it. There's like libraries, parks and recreation, other community, outside things. So there's a lot of things in there, it's 23%, but actually community services the way we think of it, like social services, is about 18%. So the police is the highest on there. Okay, so you move along. And I can Robin come to the next one?
And they just got their budget raised.
Yeah, I know. These budgets always go up. They always go up.
So just like Vince said, so who's our next person? Can you come and hold the next one? So these two go together. Does anyone know what we're looking at here?
The budget for the cops going up.
Exactly. So you can see 2008, 181, up, keeps going up. This is 2019. This is proposed for next year.
What's that number?
317 million.
What?
A 3.2% increase. Even though they've admitted crime is going down, the budget's going up. And they say it's just because of public perception and trends. They want to increase the budget by 10 million.
Wow.
So that's a huge budget.
Oh, we can get 10 million.
If you look at how much there is for housing and community services, in total, it's half, less than half of the police budget. That's the capital expense for housing and the community services.
That police budget is only $300,000 per police center.
That's a lot of police money. That's a lot of police money.
That's a lot of money.
They spend $300,000 each guy.
So one idea, reduce the police budget. Okay, what's another idea? Now? So right now, the city of Vancouver, out of 18 municipalities in the area, still has a below average property tax. So what can we do with the property tax? Make it go up.
Tax the rich.
Tax the rich to house the poor.
And I figured it's going up by 4.9% this year in the proposed budget. If it goes up another 1%, it could be another 9 million right there.
Wow.
So that's a 10 million increase in the police budget. If we take that out, that's 10 million. 10 million if we increase property taxes. We're trying to fill that gap of 30 million the city is claiming is preventing them from building 58 West Hastings. Karen?
Guidance.
Larry?
It's cheap.
Let's move over.
Move down. Okay. So this, I don't know what it stands for, but it's developer fees.
Does that developer construction maybe?
Okay. Thanks. So DCL. So this is kind of, from what I can tell, it's kind of an arbitrary number. The city charges developers. They put all the money in a bucket. They can take money out of the bucket for different things. So right now there's something like 500 million in the bucket. So they can make more. I don't see why they can't charge more and put more in the bucket, so we have a little bit more to use.
That's every time that the condo is built per unit, the condo developers have to kick in a little bit of money. It's a fixed price for every building, and then yeah, per unit, they put some money into the DCL bucket.
Okay, yeah. So, I know piggy bank's not the right image because that's for savings, but just pretend the money's coming out. So you can borrow the money, and the city has the power to go into more debt if they want to. It's a political decision. So the city always says that we can't borrow, we don't have enough money, we have a debt. They're trying to maintain their debt so they can have like corporate investment, but they can invest in the people. They could borrow money, they can invest in us, and invest in housing instead by borrowing the money against, and just make their debt go higher.
Save money.
Save money in the long run. Okay, Laurel, knows about this one. So, they can't charge a lot of rent for each unit because it's saying at shelter rate it's only $375. What if we just raise the rates? Then they're going to be generating more from the rental, from the shelter rate rental. And that's generating more money for operating revenue. And that's a provincial decision, but the city can lobby, and they say they've been lobbying already, but they can lobby harder to get the rates up so that we generate more money just through rental revenue. But at the same time, we need vacancy control, because if we just raise the rates, what's going to happen to all the rents in the community? They're all going to go up. So we also have to have vacancy control to stop that from happening.
Y'all know what vacancy control is?
Nothing.
No. Alright, let's talk about that just really quick. Vacancy control, right now, that we call it rent control in other parts of the world. In Montreal, there's rent control. That means that between vacancies, when people move out, that there's a cap for the landlord how much they can raise the rent by. We don't have that here. So that when I move out my apartment, let's say I'm paying $800 a month, they can raise it by whatever they want. They can double the rent. There's no law against that in this city. And we're gonna fight for it, right? Shame, right? Because they can make crazy amounts of money just by raising the rent and kicking you out. Kicking you out and then raising the rent. So we need vacancy control.
And that's why they have an eviction.
That's why they have rent evictions too. Who's here been rent evicted? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. It's happened. All right.
Okay, so a couple other kinds of taxes that the city could try to implement. The mansion tax. We've heard about that. So if your home is worth more than $3 million or $5 million, your tax is higher. We generate more money to go into the housing that we need. And the empty homes tax. That's just an amount the city decided on. Why can't they decide on a higher number and generate more money from that?
Tax the rich to house the poor. Is that right?
Tax the rich to house the poor.
Tax the rich to house the poor. Tax the rich to house the poor.
And then we talked about housing and healing, and there's lots of research and lots of studies. Even the World Health Organization says that housing is a really important part of health. So housing and healing, and then we also talked about how important it is in the First Nations community and for Indigenous women and families, family reunification. Thank you, Teresa. So reconciliation funding on the federal level, there is reconciliation funding. On the provincial level, on the city level, what did we not see in the budget down there? Reconciliation funding. So let's have some reconciliation funding invested by the city to go into projects like this that are about healing and having an Aboriginal wellness center in the downtown east side like we talked about. So here's the last one. Does anyone know who this is? In the picture? It's not a very good picture. Tracy Morrison.
You guys remember Tracy?
Sorry. It's not a very good picture. So we talked about having a Tracy Morrison Wellness Center and doing some real reconciliation, getting that reconciliation funding to make this into a wellness center that we've always talked about for the downtown east side. And one thing I forgot to write up is BCH. What about BCH putting in some more money to have a reconciliation healing center named after Tracy Morrison? So that would be another way to help fund the project.
Hell yeah! Thank you, Fiona. Let's do a little poll. Okay. When we'll bring up one of these ideas, you clap for it when it sounds good, okay? So the first one, let's cut the police budget. How do people feel about that? Alright, next, we have upping the property tax for rich people. Next, let's get some more developer construction levies. That just means money from developers every time they build one of their fugly condos. So it looks like the city's pretty happy to borrow money when it comes to like making parks for the rich.
Or for the Olympic Village condos, 10 million. They just came out of nowhere and borrowed 10 million for the Olympic Village condos. So let's ask them to borrow and invest money in our building, shelter rate housing.
Yeah, more our economy. What do people think about that? How about raising the rates?
And vacancy control.
And vacancy control.
So more money going right into rents and not rents going up higher and higher. Is that a good idea? How about taxing the mansions? How about reconciliation and a healing center, an Aboriginal health and healing center? So we're going to go back to the city and talk about some of these ideas, especially now that we have your feedback. We know that you like these ideas. And if they say, we don't know where we're going to get the money, or they're going to write a memo to the city and say, like, we couldn't figure out how we're going to fund this building, we can say, well, we're not experts, we're not mathematicians, but we came up with some ideas. Like, why don't you look at some of these?
Sound good? Yeah. Okay. I think that just about wraps it up. January when city council, when they get out of their beds and like, you know, make it to city hall and want to vote on 58, that's what we're going to do. We're going to come out and make sure that they don't sink this plan and they don't end the fight for the soul of the downtown east side. Is that right? Yes. Is it 100%? So are we, let's get a commitment. Are we for 100% welfare and pension rate housing at 58 West 8th Street?
Unless it's 100%.
Yeah, we're gonna fight. We're gonna keep fighting. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Last thing. Let's all stand. It's a tradition here in the downtown east side that we end our events with a moment of silence for all those who have passed away in the fight for decolonization, for the right to housing, the right to power and self-determination. We're going to give them a moment of silence, and if you know someone that was close to your heart, please say their name in this moment. Thank you. May this moment of silence be